Review what we tried to start, what was it, Thursday last week? Was that the last time some of you were here? Some of you, it's been much longer. So we talked about what the basic sine and cosine graphs look like. And we reviewed amplitude and period. I hope it was review, but I understand if it wasn't. Okay. So the period is the length of a cycle, and finding the period from the equation can be really complicated because it's an inverse relationship. It's 2 pi divided by whatever the b value in here is, because it has to do with horizontal stretching and shrinking. So it's a reciprocal relationship. Okay, amplitude. Good news, A tells us the amplitude, and that's how far above and below the midline we need to go, okay? Then we talked about the sine, starts at the midline or the origin and goes up and then down, has a period of 2 pi. The cosine starts at the maximum, goes down to the midline, down to the, and then back up to the top. Okay, so we need to know the difference between those shapes. So we're going to start today with just some that are affecting the amplitude and the period. So when we do a graph for this class, you need to graph one period. You don't have to do 2 full periods for me, but you need to be able to write 5 ordered pairs, okay? And to find those, what are called quarter points, you would take the period and divide it by 4, and that's what you're going to count by. So let's see. Did I do this one maybe Friday and we got, or Thursday? We didn't even get one of them done? Okay, let's start with number 3. All right, we'll do one that has a 3, but all right, so on this question, let's see if my pen is working. Please work. All right, so A is out here is 4, and remember the amplitude is always positive. Okay, so even if there was a negative out there, that would be a reflection. So since this has no shift vertically or horizontally, I'm going to draw a little dotted line to show that the maxes are going to be at 4 and the mins are at -4. I need guidance because I otherwise will go crazy and put them in the wrong places. Then this is the same as if it said 4 cosine 1/2 theta. Is everybody okay with that? That b is 1/2 or divided by 2, same difference? All right, the b affects the period. So again, the amplitude was 4, and that's where we drew those lines. The b value of 1/2 tells us that the period is 2 pi divided by 1/2, or over 1/2. But what happens when you divide fractions, guys? You change it to multiply by the reciprocal. Does that sound familiar? So this becomes a 4 pi is the period. That means it's going to finish one cycle by 4 pi, which they generously don't even give us out to 4 pi. And then the quarter points, let me switch colors here. The quarter points are where you take the period and divide by 4. So 4 pi divided by 4 is 1 pi. This is what you're counting by to label your quarter points. So the first quarter point is going to be at 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. So that's not bad on this graph because they're labeled. Sometimes they're really ugly, like 1 pi over 8, 2 pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, and we have to squeeze them in. All right. Cosine. What's the shape of a cosine? The shape of a cosine starts at the maximum, goes down, and then back up to the maximum. Is everybody good with that? The sine would start at the midline, but the cosine starts at the maximum. Okay, so if we got to start at the maximum and finish 4 pi later up at the maximum, halfway there we're going to be at the minimum, and we're going to cross the midline halfway to each of those. So It should look like a stretched half circle or quarter circle, stretched quarter circle, stretched quarter circle, stretched quarter circle, okay? And it would continue to the left. So if you wanted to draw some more, you certainly could, okay? Badly, in my case. Now, on a quiz, you will have to write the ordered pairs. You'll need 5 ordered pairs. So the first one I have is 0, 4. Then I went over to pi, and that one is 0. It's right on the axis. The next one is 2 pi. Can anybody tell me the y coordinate of that one? -4. Then we had 3 pi was back at 0, or the x-axis. And then 4 pi was up at 4. And that's how you'll have to do it on the quiz, okay? The good news on the quiz, I didn't give you graph paper, so you can just sketch away. You'll find in a minute that sometimes it's easier to not have to match to a graph paper. You can just draw your sketch and then tell me where the points are, and I'll show you some like that in a minute. All right. Let's do number 5 because 2 things are going to appear. It's going to have a real tiny period, so you're going to see what happens when you have to try to squeeze things in here. And do you see that that's supposed to be a negative out there? Okay, so the A is -3, the A value, but what does that make the amplitude? Do you remember? If I asked you the amplitude, you have to state it as the absolute value of that, so you would say the amplitude is 3. The negative sign is the shape where you're going to say the sign normally starts at the midline and does this, but that negative is flipping it over. So our negative sign is going to look at the midline, go down. Okay? So this is what a sign usually looks like, and this is a negative sign for the shape we're going to do over here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put little dotted lines at 3 and -3 to help me. And the shape is going to be, we're going to start at the origin and go down first. But we got to figure out, because this is graph paper with lines on it, we can't just draw it and then put in our period. We have to figure out how to match what their lines are. So the B value being 4 makes the period 2 pi over 4, or pi over 2. So it is to finish an entire cycle by pi over 2. So I'm going to draw a little dotted line there to show I got to finish the whole thing before I get to pi over 2. Or it's going to finish up here again. All right. Then there's this business with quarter points. Quarter points means you divide by 4. The period divided by 4, okay? Let me write that for you. So pi over 2 gets divided by 4, or pi over 2 gets multiplied by 1/4. Right? Dividing by 4 is multiplied by 1/4. So that becomes a pi over 8. That, my quarter points, means I'm counting by pi over 8s. So I'm going to start at the middle. The shape told me I'm going to go down to pi over 8. Is this labeled pi over 2, guys? Okay, so halfway to pi over 2 would be a pi over 4. So halfway there would be a pi over 8. So we're going to have, let's start writing our ordered pairs or I'm going to get confused. We had 0, 0. The next one, we go to the right, pi over 8, and we're down to what? -3. Then if we go another pi over 8, what's 2 pi over 8s, guys? Pi over 4. And that one's back at the midline of 0. So we have a very skinny little whoop, okay? And then the next one is a maximum. Now we're counting by pi over 8s. We had 1 pi over 8. This was 2 pi over 8 before we reduced it. The next one would be 3 pi over 8. And that one is clear up at 3. And the next one would be 4 pi over 8, which would reduce to pi over 2, and that one's back at the midline of 0. So that 4, instead of stretching it horizontally, remember it's an inverse relationship, it crimped it up really tight to 1/4 of the normal period. So there's the ordered pairs. And the negative shape went down, but the amplitude remained a positive 3. All right. We're not going to graph these. These are negative. Oh, yes, we are. Okay, I wrote myself some notes. Let me grab this so I remember which ones I wanted to do. Yeah, I am going to do this number 7 with you because it has a weird period. See if you like it better when there's no graph paper. Okay. So number 7, A is 4, which is going to be the amplitude because there's no negative. And B is 3, which is going to make the period 2 pi over 3. Okay, 2 more things I'm going to write down. It is a cosine graph, so the shape, anybody tell me about the shape? Where's the cosine start? At the max. Okay, so we're going to start at the max and do this. What else was I going to write? Oh, the quarter points. Okay, the quarter points is a lovely 2 pi over 3, which is our period, and then we have to divide by 4 or take 1/4 of that. I'm just going to multiply by 1/4 to save a little room. 1/4 of 2 pi over 3 means we have 2 pi over 12, or we're counting by what? Pi over 6s. Okay, pi over 6 is our quarter point. All right. Now, this is why I like not having graph paper, because I can go over here. I'm going to say it's going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can put a dotted line if I want. It's going to go down 4. -4. Put a dotted line if I want. But now, because there's no points anywhere, I can just draw it and then go back and label my points. So the shape was this. I'm going to start right here. I'm going to go to the midline, down, back up, and to the max. Now I can go back and decide what those points were. Yes? I won't be picky about that, no. Just so you write your ordered pairs correctly. All right. So we're supposed to count by pi over 6s. So this is going to be 1 pi over 6. This ordered pair down here is 2 pi over 6. What does that reduce, though? 2 pi over 6 reduces to pi over 3. The next one would be 3 pi over 6, which reduces to 1/2. And the next one would be 4 pi over 6, which reduces to 2/3. Is that where we were supposed to finish? Was 2/3? 2 pi over 3? Yay! Okay, so now all we need to do is put in the rest of the ordered pairs. This one was over 0 up 4. This is pi over 6, 0. This guy's pi over 3, -4. You can write these off to the side or on the graph, it doesn't matter to me. Pi over 2, 0, and 2 pi over 3, 4. Do you see, though, where you didn't have to try to match it to the graph paper? It makes it less stressful for me. Okay. I am not going to take time to do this one, I don't think. It is a negative sign, so sign starts at the midline. It would go down. Whoops, that's really, really not proportional. It's a negative sign, okay? The amplitude would be 1/2. If you don't want to try to draw this, you don't have to. You can just follow along. So it would be going up to 1/2 and down to -1/2. The period would be 2 pi over 3, which if we did 1/4 of that, would be another 2 pi over 12 or pi over 6. So the points would be the same, pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6. Okay, I'm not going to finish. This would be a pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6, which reduces, okay? Not going to write the ordered pairs. I just wanted to give you a little idea. All right, these just ask the amplitude and the period. You don't have to graph them. So what's the amplitude on 11? Anybody? 1/8. What's the amplitude on 13? +1. And the amplitude on number 15? 6. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're all good. Yeah, you're good. The period for number 11 would be 2 pi over 5, because B is just 5. Everybody okay? Sorry, I was distracted there. Do you need me to go back over that? B is 5, so it's just 2 pi over 5. I can tell you the quarter points, if you wanted to know, would be 1/4 of that, or 2 pi over 20, or pi over 10. You'd be counting by pi over 10s. I'm not going to give you that, but what's the B value on 13, guys? 1/2. Is everybody okay that there's a 1/2 there? So then the period would be 2 pi divided by 1/2, or 2 pi times 2 over 1, which is 4 pi. So what would the quarter points be? If you take 4 pi divided by 4, you'd just be counting by pi's. 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. All right. B here is 7. So this would be a very disgusting period of 2 pi over 7. And I'm not going to worry about the quarter points because I do hereby solemnly swear I will never give you a period of 2 pi over 7. Okay? All right. We are going to go on and talk about some things on worksheet 14. We're not going to do all of this. I'm just going to start talking a little bit about vertical shifts, okay? We're not going to do horizontal shifts today. Like any other function, trig functions can be translated up, down, left, right. H in here represents a horizontal shift, and we're not doing those today. K back here represents a vertical shift. Positive K would shift the graph up, negative K would shift the graph down. Now, can we just fill this in for the notes today, and then we can start on the examples tomorrow? But do you remember when it's inside with the X, what does a +3 do? It actually shifts it left, right? And if it said X minus pi over 2, it would shift it right. All right, we're not going to do any of those today. Those are by far the hardest thing you have to do with trig functions. But all that a vertical shift does, okay, as long as we're shifting just vertically, it'll create a new horizontal axis called the midline, and reference line to which the graph oscillates above and below. So shifting up 4 just makes the y equals 4, would be y equals k. Y equals 4 becomes the new midline. So there's 2 different ways you can do these. I prefer to draw the midline and go from there. I know a lot of teachers just rename the x-axis as the midline, so I'll try to do a little of each. This one has graph paper for us, so I'm going to actually draw a midline up at 3. So I'm going to put a dotted line up here. Let's fill these in real fast. What's the amplitude of this disgusting thing over here, guys? 3/2 or 1.5. I'm going to use some decimals, I think, on this. The period has no b value. B is just 1. So the period is a normal 2 pi. It has no phase shift. We haven't talked about those yet. The vertical shift is the k at the back. So that's up 3, which just makes the midline y equals 3. And that's the line that I put on here as. Now, if y equals 3 is our midline and our amplitude is 1.5 or 1.5, we need to go up 1.5 units above, and that's going to be the maximum. And those are going to be at 4.5. Does that sound right, guys? 3 plus 1.5, okay? And you can write a fraction if you want, but I was going to be lazy and use decimals. If we go down from 3, 1.5, what would that be? $1.5. Yep, 1.5 will be our minimums. Okay, now this is why I hate having graph paper, but we need to finish this by 2 pi. And remember, it's a sine graph, so the sine starts at the midline, goes up like that. So it's going to finish here at 2 pi, 1 pi, 0, max, min. Okay. If the period is 2 pi, and we do 1/4 of that to get our quarter points, we'd have pi over 2 pi over 4 would reduce to what? Pi over 2? So we're supposed to count by pi over 2's. So here's a pi over 2. 2 pi over 2 is pi. The next one would be what? 3 pi over 2's. And then we'd have 4 pi over 2's, which would be 2 pi. So help me with the ordered pairs. What was the first one? Across 0, but up to 3. The next one is over pi over 2, but we went up an additional 1.5, so we're at 4.5. The next was at the midline. We were over to pi and at the midline of 3. Then we went over another pi over 2, so we're at 3 pi over 2, and that one is at the minimum of 3 pi over 2. Sorry, I wrote that wrong. Of 1.5. And then we were back at 2 pi to the midline of 3. Maybe you could write them in here. I don't know if you had room to write them anywhere. And I don't care. It's your notes, so if you didn't write them, that's okay too. All right, so that's one way to do it, is to actually do it on the graph paper. When you don't have graph paper, like this one, there's a couple options, okay? First of all, what's A, the amplitude? It's just 1 because there's nothing out in front. Okay, the B is what? When it's over 2, it means the B is 1/2, which makes the period 2 pi over 1/2, or 2 pi times the reciprocal, so it becomes 4 pi is going to be the period. What are the quarter points then, guys? That's an easy one. Quarter points are the period divided by 4, so it's just, we're going to count by pi, right? 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. Yay! All right, what is this minus 4 at the end telling us? Yes, this is a shift down 4. I don't know what that's supposed to be. That's telling us it's shifting down 4. So the midline will be at y equals -4. All right, there's 2 ways you can do this. Some teachers have you just call this the new midline of y equals -4, okay? And then you have to remember that as you write the ordered pairs, that those are really at -4. Is that, you want me to do one that way? I don't usually do them that way. What I usually do is I go ahead and do my little dotted lines. So down here at -4, I would draw a dotted line and say that's y equals -4. You can do it either way, okay? Then it's going to go out to 4 pi, and the cosine is this shape, yes, guys? So it starts, if our amplitude is 1, it goes up to -3 and down to -5. That's it. And it's counting by pi's. So this one is at 4 pi -3. Halfway there was at 2 pi, and it was down at -5. This was 1 pi, and it was at the midline. This one was 0, -3. And this one is 3 pi at the midline of -4. My problem with renaming the midline, okay? This is what some teachers would have had you do. I can go through it real quick. You just say, okay, it's a cosine graph, so it goes up and does this. And you are naming this line -4. But that means you have to remember every time that this is -4 and this is -4, not 0, okay? So this would have been 4 pi, 1 above -4 would be -3. This is 1 pi midline, 2 pi minimum, 3 pi midline, which is exactly what I have. It makes it easier for me if it's not ever looking like the x-axis, but you can do either one. All right. Number 7, this is my last example. We have time. All right. Talk me through this. Tell me something. I'm going to call on some of you. Elena F. Can you tell me anything? Anything. The shape, the amplitude, the period, the shift. I don't care. Amplitude is 3. Elena. Other Elena, yes. Okay, so it has a vertical shift of up 1, which also makes, it will sometimes ask you on a quiz to identify the midline, so it's going to be up at y equals 1. Is that okay with everybody? All right, I'm going to actually start here. It's shifted up 1, so I'm going to move my x-axis down just a little bit, and it goes up 1, so that's my midline. You can label this as your midline if you want. Just make sure you are careful. It's y equals 1 is my midline. But I have to go how far above and below that? So I'm going to go up to 2, 3 more above that. Line at 1 would be 4. And that's where all my maxes are going to be. And 3 below 1 would be 0, 1, -2, and that's where all my minimums are going to be. Ben, do you know what shape a sign is? Where does it usually start? Yes, good job. It starts at the mid, right? This one is still going to start at the midline. Okay, the sign shape is normally this. But that negative means what's going to happen, guys? Instead of going up first, it's going to go down first. Okay, there's no graph paper, so I could just draw it. Okay. So that was shape, amplitude, midline. Now we got to worry about the period. That's the part everybody hates. Me too. The B value in here is just what? Yep, good job. The period is just 2 pi. So it's going to finish over here at 2 pi 1. But the quarter points, remember, means we have to divide that by 4. So we have 2 pi divided by 4, or times 1/4, which is 2 pi over 4, or pi over 8. Is everybody okay that 2 pi over 4 reduces to pi over 8? So we're going to have an eighth here, 1 pi over 8. The midline, back at the midline, make sure you put in the right spot, is 2 pi over 8. What does that reduce to, guys? What am I doing? Yeah, 2 pi over 4 is not pi over 8. Somebody stop me. 2/4 reduces to what? Pi over 2. I'm glad I didn't get too much further into that craziness. I'm like, how's pi over 8 going to get me to 2 pi? Oh my goodness, sorry. 2 pi over 4 is pi over 2. So this is a pi over 2. Then we have 2 pi over 2's, which should be pi, which makes sense. That's halfway to 2 pi, right? And then here would be 3 pi over 2's. And then 4 pi over 2's is 2 pi. Sorry to the home audience that the video is messed up for a second there. This one's down at -2. This one was at 0, 1. This one is a pi 1 is the midline, and this one is 3 pi 4. Okay. I'm going to assign a couple of these with the vertical shift. If you're really struggling, we can do some more tomorrow, okay? Now, part of the lesson, or the homework so the homework, guys, is just to do 13b and 15a, the evens. So can you go back and circle those on 13b? So it's just going to be 8 and 10 that you have to graph. And then 12, 14, and 16 are just give me the amplitude and period, yes. Did I do something wrong? It was shifted up 1. And then when you go down 3 from there, it's -2. That's an issue that I have if I rename that, if I don't shift it up 1. You know, if I call this line 1, then sometimes I get confused. But yes, good question, okay? Was 3 down below, so that's where that came from. Now, 15a, then there was just 3 graphs, okay? And those do all have vertical shifts. Number 4 is a little bit confusing. Let me write here. On 15a, number 4 could be written y equals negative cosine of 4 theta, and then a +2 at the end, okay? It's written funny. It currently says 2 minus cosine 4 theta, but it is a vertical shift of up 2. So that one was a little confusing. Okay, I will stop the video, but